Hello again. Today we're going to look at how a self-paced content creator that does everything with automation gets all of the cool stuff out. Alan, what exactly are we going to look at today?
Today, we're going to be looking at the CI/CD pipeline for Ready Set Cloud. Ready Set Cloud is a content hub that I created that does a blog, it does a podcast, and it does a newsletter. And I run it on a weekly basis completely by myself, along with my day job. And there is, because of all the automation in the CI/CD pipeline, I'm able to do that by myself.
Wow. So I'm really honored that you're on today. For me, Ready Set Cloud has been one of my learnings for the past 2, 3 years, maybe. So it really feels very cool to talk to you about how you actually deploy and bring that to life, right? Because for me, it always looked like, well, there's Ellen and there's 10 people behind that do a lot of things. Cool. So you said you have a content hub, Alan. Before we go into the details of that content hub and how you actually host that, let's tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and kind of how you and I met, if you remember.
I don't remember how we met, and I'm embarrassed to say that, but I'm sure you'll remind me. So I am an AWS serverless hero uh, and an ecosystem engineer at Momento, and that really is just a fancy way of saying a developer advocate. Prior to being at Momento, I was at a company that did GovTech software for 11 years, and I did software engineering. I was a tech lead for a while. I did engineering management. And then kind of closed my career there as an enterprise architect. So I've kind of run the gamut on positions that you can hold inside of software engineering. And now I am sharing my experiences as an advocate where I just get to talk about it all day, which is a lot of fun.
Wow, that sounds like a dream job, actually. And yeah, you kind of made it through most of the stuff that I also did in my career. So it's amazing now to see you in all of the stuff that you're actually doing, right? Especially, you're an advocate of your podcast and share that all the time because you get so much interesting people on that talk about a lot of different details. But today, we're not going to talk about your podcast. We're not going to talk about the content that you create, but we're going to talk really about how do you bring your content to life. And I think that's the important pieces. So, Ready Set Cloud. I think it's hosted on a virtual server that you acquired 15 years ago and you copy paste all of your scripts manually. Is that correct?
That sounds closer to, I think, your blog, Johannes. But mine is hosted in AWS Amplify. It's actually written completely in Markdown and built with a static site generator called Hugo. And part of my Amplify CI pipeline goes and actually runs Hugo, compiles the Markdown files into HTML, and then uses Amplify hosting to host the static site in S3 with a CloudFront distribution in front of it.
Whoa, that sounds way cooler than my virtual box that I still have for my blog. Um, why did you choose Amplify hosting? What's the idea behind that? There are so much other possibilities to host something.
Yeah, at the time, I started hosting in Amplify in like 2018. And at the time, I hadn't really opened my eyes to the world of tech, to be honest with you. And I didn't know about things like Vercel. Honestly, I don't even know if Vercel was a mainstream thing in 2018. I didn't know about Netlify. I didn't know about any of these other sites that just make it easy for you. But I was intimately familiar with the AWS ecosystem. So I said, okay, well, I know that Amplify has essentially a one-click go set of capabilities as far as site hosting goes. So I tried that out and it worked and decided to run with it. It does a lot of things, and it manages a lot of it for you. And personally, I'll probably say this several times during this show. I find myself pretty lazy. So if somebody is offering to do something for me, 9 times out of 10, I will take that.
Oh yeah, and I've had so much cool articles, and I've tried to rebuild a few of them already. So I think I can link a few in the show notes. Um, where do you didn't you? So my perception of Amplify and Amplify hosting has always been Yeah, it's for POCs and it's for playing around a little bit. So haven't you outgrown Amplify already with your blog and your content that you deliver?
That is a good question. And I'm going to separate this kind of into two pieces. So, one, the actual website, readysetcloud.io, is still a static site. It's still just HTML. I think it has one API that it calls, and that's subscribe to my newsletter. Other than that, it's just static site. It's just
Mhm.
it literally doesn't do anything. It doesn't fetch data from APIs. It's statically built during the pipeline and then deployed into S3. So as far as what Amplify is doing, as far as the hosting part of it goes, no, not at all. It's about as basic as it gets. Now the other part, which is probably the part that we're going to talk about extensively today, is the extensive automation that I have kind of jerry rigged on top of that CI pipeline, which honestly has nothing to do with pipeline, or sorry, with Amplify. It hooks into one of the AWS service events when the Amplify build is done. It publishes an event to EventBridge, and then I tie into that with a whole slew of automations. So it's not really considered part of Amplify so much as it is the 100 other Lambda functions and step functions and events that I'm firing in my serverless backend.
Cool. So what you actually just said is I have outgrown Amplify hosting and I'm using it to host my static pieces, but everything else is hosted as an event-driven architecture behind the pipeline, if I understood you correctly.
Sure, we could say that. We could say that.
We could say that. Let's have a look. Let's see. So I think I hope that you had the chance to prepare a little bit on how this pipeline looks like. And I would assume that everything starts with Git on your side, right? So you
It
put
does.
your yeah. So what Git provider are you using, and where are you storing your stuff? Where does this journey start?
Everything starts in GitHub. And like I said, the website itself is just it's just Markdown. So in GitHub, I have all of my articles, all of the front matter for the podcast and the newsletter. Everything's written in Markdown. That's kind of the source of truth, and it's kept in GitHub in my Ready Set Cloud repository. And then I have uh, architectures or like different services and frameworks and patterns that I've written about over the past few years as part of different GitHub repositories. But what you see on the screen right now is what happens when I publish a blog or a newsletter. Really, it's a step functions encompasses a lot, right? When you just put a step function icon on an architecture diagram, you know that there's a lot kind of under the covers that it's doing. So this is how it's grown. This is what it's gone to. So I push. Let's say I'm publishing a blog post and I finish it on Monday, and I always publish my blog posts on Wednesday. And so what I can do is I can date my blog post for Wednesday, and I'll push to main in GitHub. And when a change is pushed to main, Amplify has permissions to that GitHub repository. It picks it up and triggers a build. It will go and it will build. And what it does in that CI pipeline, it really only does a couple of things. It downloads a specific version of Hugo. It will compile the markdown into uh, HTML, and then it will drop that into S3 behind the CloudFront distribution. Uh, After that, it uses SAM, big advocate of SAM, for deploying the backend architecture. We don't have to get into that. But as far as the backend stuff, like everything that you see over here on the right hand side is also contained in this repository for Ready Set Cloud. So it will do a SAM build and a SAM deploy for a lot of
And
this stuff.
that's run where? That's on the step function.
In this Amplify build. This is a build. So
Ah,
it's
okay,
actually going and running a pipeline definition.
okay.
So runs Hugo, drop the files, runs SAM build, SAM deploy. That's it. So it will go and deploy the architecture that you see over on the right hand side, and then automatically when that job is done, Amplify the service itself publishes an event to EventBridge that says job status succeed, and then from there that's where this architecture picks up and actually takes off. So in the example that we're talking about, I have a blog post that I've dated in the future.
Mhm.
So I have a Lambda function that specifically looks for blog posts, and the way that I identify that is actually in the commit message in uh, in this push. So like what I'll do, let's do this. It'll be blog CICD, something like that. I'll just give it a short name. And what this Lambda function is doing is it's looking
Mhm.
for this square bracket blog in the front of the commit message. So it knows that, yes, it's this content type. Conversely,
Mhm.
if I wanted to trigger the newsletter pipeline, I would do newsletter. I think I'm at 102 now. It would look for that, and this Lambda function would know to pick that up and go on. So what it does is it looks for this, then it goes and dives into the git commit using the GitHub API,
Mhm.
fetches the content from GitHub, and then starts parsing
Mhm.
it and doing all these automations down here. So specifically, what we're talking about right now is a blog scheduled for the future. So in this Lambda
Mhm.
function, it loads the data out of GitHub. It looks at the date, the publish date, sees that it's in the future, and will fire an event that says, "Hey, I have something for Wednesday." Publish an event that gets triggered by a Lambda function. That Lambda function will say, "Okay, Wednesday at 9 a.m., I'm going to trigger an event bridge schedule and save a record in DynamoDB that says I have something for you on Wednesday at 9." At which point,
And, and
yeah, go ahead.
and at which point this piece will, so okay, so various different things happening after that CI/CD pipeline Amplify has actually concluded, and EventBridge gets that event, and that's the one that is now being picked up. And we jumped ahead a little bit into that direction, right? We went into the middle piece of that. My question before we go into the details there would be: would you consider this part of your CI/CD pipeline?
Yes, because because at the end result of everything here is the delivery of my production asset, if you will. The production asset being the blog post or the newsletter, whatever it is. And really, everything that's happening here, at least when we're scheduling things in the future, is we are setting up an event to trigger in the future to automatically deliver said asset. So because everything that I'm doing in this architecture and this workflow is asset management and not so much
Mhm.
really about the data and delivering functionality in software, I do consider that part of the CI pipeline.
Okay, makes sense. Now, if you have only Markdown until in your website at the end, how do you see if there is now a typo or a problem in the CI/CD part being created that you? And so, how do you test your deployment before it goes live? Is my question.
Well, I always preview everything locally. I always go and I proofread the content locally just to make sure that it looks and compiles the way I would expect. And then I just kind of trust it. At this point, it's run. I don't change it that often. So at this point, it's run literally hundreds of times. And since I don't
Okay.
mess with anything, it reliably goes and ships out.
Okay, makes sense. So that means that you see things locally on the Markdown, you preview that locally, and then you kind of push it. That means there is no tests in your CI/CD pipeline. There is no unit test or no integration test in that Amplify box that we saw in the beginning.
Yeah, I get an email if the Amplify
Okay.
build fails,
Okay.
but it's not running tests. If there's a way to test a static site generator, I am unaware of it, to be honest. It's not to say that there's not a way, but because I haven't done extensive research into it. But as far as like what I'm pushing to main, there's not a whole. It's
Mhm.
not code.
Cool. Okay, so then let's go back to that middle part of the event bridge and then Lambda kicking off an event bridge schedule again, right?
Yeah,
Where you put something in Dynamo.
yeah. So I said
Until
publish
this,
something. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, you said publish something in the future. And until this space, is there already something on Amplify available or not yet? So how does
No.
the website now know that there is something new coming?
Great question. So with static site generators, at least specifically with Hugo, things dated in the future don't build. So if it's Monday, and let's say uh, today we're recording on the 4th of March, and let's say I'm publishing something on the 6th of March. If I go and I try to run that locally and I date my blog post for the 6th of March, it's not going to show up because it's in the future.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing when I go through this CI pipeline. Amplify will build it in Hugo and it's not going to show up. So really, all I'm doing when I'm scheduling a post for later is I'm doing a one-time event bridge schedule for the date that I want it to release, and all that
Mhm.
schedule is doing is triggering the build again. That's all it's
Oh,
doing.
really?
Yeah.
No new commit, no update to Git, just re-trigger the build.
Yep. That's all it's doing because when the build is retriggered, the theory
Mhm.
is that it will be the date that I want to schedule the content. So then Hugo, the static site generator, will say, okay, this is now able to go live, rebuild, and run through everything. And at which point, then, its path along the way diverges from before, where before it said in the future, let me
Ah.
go and schedule a build in the future. Now it says, oh,
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to go and post it now, and I'm going to run all the post processing events on it.
Okay. Once again, it will use which commit ID when you restart the build?
It doesn't,
Because at the moment, does it use the last one? What happens if you kind of publish two things in parallel?
I don't do that.
Okay.
It probably would not be great. I mean, it would run, they
Hmm.
would both end up on the site and it wouldn't end up being a
Yeah.
problem. Really, what would end up happening is you get parallel executions of this entire thing,
Hmm.
and they would each have the context of their own, and they would get
Hmm.
built with everything that needs to be live uh, at the same time, really. But this one would be handling one specific piece, and then the other one would be handling another specific piece that was published.
Okay. So at the end, the event bridge schedule that we have will trigger amplify build kind of from the start again, which will then trigger event bridge and which will then now go to the upper part.
Yeah. Yes.
Cool. What's the DynamoDB there? What do you use that for?
That's the file reference. So when it's looking for this commit, it also is grabbing the specific file that was added. So it knows what file do I need to work with. So what it's doing there is it's saving the files. This was going to be the markdown file of the blog post that I'm publishing. It's saving that in DynamoDB. So this Lambda function is going to first look at DynamoDB and say, do I have anything that was scheduled in the future? If yes, if I get back a hit on that result, then it will go and process that file that I saved for later. It will have the context of the commit in the file.
Mhm.
And then it goes
Cool.
down and does its whole thing.
Cool. So now we managed to reach the 6th of March, and now our blog post is going live. And now we hit the upper part.
And we
So a
do.
different step function is triggered based on that lambda function.
Yes.
What happens in that one?
In this first one, it's going to cross post the content. So I host my blog posts on my website on Ready Set Cloud, but to maximize my engagement, my reach, I also post it on Medium. I also post it on dev.to, and I also post it on Hashnode. So this step function will parse that blog post. It will transform it into the data format that each one of those three websites expects. It's different on all three, which is annoying. And then it
Annoying.
will go and it will publish those to each one appropriately. Uh, and it
Okay.
does a handful of things as well. A couple of really cool things, like if I do cross linking, which I always do on my blog post. If I reference another blog post that I wrote, what it will do is it will go and it will reference the blog posts on said site. So let's say it's transforming the content for Medium, and I have 5 posts. I have 5 links to other posts that I've written in there. It will go and it will grab those 5 links to the Medium versions of the articles, update the source code to point to the Medium versions, and then post it to Medium.
And did you update this now for the click counter thing that you built? So you recently had a blog post writing about tracking clicks that go into your newsletter, or is this the Lambda function below?
That one
It's
is
a function below.
that one's only in the newsletter. I'm not doing that kind of link
Okay,
tracking inside of the blog post. I haven't found a good need for that yet. Outside of, or inside of the blog posts, I can action very clearly uh, the most clicked on links inside of a newsletter, but I don't quite have an action for referenced articles inside of a blog post.
cool. Now, after the cross posting happened, and your posts appear on all of the blogging sites that you mentioned, um, you're done. Your content is live. So what the hell comes after that? Because it looks like even
Yeah.
longer than
Yeah. So the rest of the stuff in there is actually for me. It's actually what helps me scale myself when it comes to maintaining everything. So the first thing that it does is just does a little bit of writing analysis. And that's again for me, so I can identify trends in my own writing over time. So it will fire an event, and that event gets picked up by another step function workflow. And I did it this way because the step function workflow here is actually in a separate repository. It's not contained in Ready Set Cloud. So I wanted
Mhm.
that one to be a reference architecture for other people. So I kept it isolated and I triggered it from an event so I can go on and do its thing. So it does two things. One, it uses, I think it actually uses ChatGPT instead of Bedrock to identify the overall theme. It also identifies writing skill level, and then it identifies tone. And it actually writes that back to the source, right? Writes it back to
Mhm.
GitHub uh, for me so I can look at it and I can see over time, did I do a good job on this? Is my writing skill level constantly improving? Am I decreasing if I'm trying to rush? What's my overall tone that I consistently write in? And what's my writing skill level? Eventually, what I'd really like to do is make this whole platform some sort of SaaS hosting thing and be able to give these types of analytics and trends over time to other content creators. So you can, get all these pieces of data per blog post or per whatever type of content you're creating and then track that trend over time. Is your skill level improving? How's your tone on average? What is your writing style? Because a lot of people don't know. If you ask any content creator, what's your writing style? A lot of them will just look at you with a deer in the headlights look and say, I don't know. Fun? And a lot of time that's not actually the case. So that's an objective way to actually go and see.
Now you need to ask me
I know a German is
if I.
not going to tell me that fun is the writing style,
Mm,
but go ahead. What is your what is your writing style?
I don't know. I never checked, and I didn't do any blogs for a few months now. I think my last blog is from December, because I actually ran out of time, and I'm doing more video this at the moment, right?
Yeah,
But maybe we can get ChatGPT to assess my video style. That would be funny.
yeah, that'd be cool.
But
That
this
might
sounds
actually be
cool,
fun.
right? So this long, yeah, yeah, we could try. But it would be good for me as well to get my writing style and learn a little bit about my own style. I didn't really ever think about that, right? That's a cool functionality.
Yes.
Now another event bridge event afterwards,
Yeah, the writing analysis piece actually does one more thing, of course, and
of course.
it it will do text to speech. So it goes and it passes
Ah,
the entire content over to Poly, Amazon Poly. It will create I think it's an MP3 with some neural voice. I choose the high end voice to actually sound like a person reading. Save that to S3, and then update the reference to the spoken version back in GitHub. And then my Hugo site will regenerate. It'll recompile. And then when it has a pointer to a spoken version of a blog site, it actually embeds that audio inside of the web page itself.
Okay, so now you spoiled my question because that's the one I was missing here. I wanted to ask you for that. So, for those that don't know what we're talking about, if you look at Ready Set Cloud, there's a small button that actually says, "Read this text aloud for me," right? And that's what Alan was just explaining, right? There's an MP3 behind that, rendered by Polly, that you can then actually retrieve. And I think you already also had an article about how to integrate that, like a few months ago.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Every single one of these things, every single one of these step function workflows has a blog post on it on Ready Set Cloud. That's actually how I've been driving a lot of the content on my website, is right about how I've been improving it, which has been a fantastic learning experience. It's actually what Luke Van Donkersgood and I talked about in my podcast episode. My most recent one is building things that matter in production for side projects. Helps you learn, helps your comprehension skills. And then because it's in production with other people using it, you don't just haphazardly go and push stuff out there.
Yep, I agree. That's also what I'm trying to do, right? And it's really important that you also experience the stuff that you blog or talk about, right? Otherwise, you don't have a chance to be honest and transparent, I think.
100% agree. Okay, so the last thing.
Last piece.
Last thing.
Before we go into it,
Yeah.
why is there a second event bridge event? Why are not using the first one or the second? So we have like three different event bridge events kind of in this mix.
Yep.
Why are we not using the first one and just reacting on that directly and then sending out the two step functions in parallel?
It is for the same exact reason that I have an event bridge event triggering the second one, because this functionality is its own repository, and I don't have tightly coupled references between the two of them. So every single one of these things I have in its own repo, because it was essentially a case study. It was a highlight reference architecture that I've written about in isolation. And I want to use all of them individually inside of the inside of this pipeline. So the best case scenario that I have when I have to loosely couple these things is just fire an event.
Okay, makes sense.
So
Then let's look at that last one.
yes.
Social media posting.
Yeah. And this one's actually really important. And this one came a lot later. My job at Memento, I have bounced back and forth between the product team and the marketing team in the past year. And I have learned so much about marketing and getting your brand visible in front of people. And one of the most, I guess, one of the best lessons that I've learned is repetition, getting your content in front of people over and over and over again, especially with Ready Set Cloud as a global audience. And I live in Central Time. I live in Texas, and if I post something at 9 a.m. here, Johannes, for you, depending on the time of year, it could be 3 in the afternoon, it could be 4 in the afternoon. Which means if I publish something at 5 p.m., it's going to be in the middle of the night for you, and you might miss it, especially if I post it on Twitter one time, where I say, here's my new blog post. And, Twitter and things of that nature, they're pretty ephemeral, where if you don't see it in the first few hours, you're not going to see it usually, unless it gets a lot of traction. So what I did.
So we're talking about Twitter here, right? In Twitter, that makes sense. But what's funny about LinkedIn is that sometimes you get posts from 4 months ago.
Yeah, LinkedIn is way better at
So
replaying content
that's true.
and keeping it visible.
Cool. So what does that do? Now let's assume we're on Twitter or on X these days.
Yeah. Okay. So the last thing that I did, I lied again. This writing analysis step function workflow does three things. One, it does the writer analysis. How'd you do? Two, it does the poly text to speech. And then three, because I've already fed the entire content into ChatGPT and I've loaded that context in there, I go ahead and ask it to create 8 tweets for me. So it knows the full content of the article, and I say, create 8 Twitter posts for this. Something that's engaging, something that highlights really the spirit of the content. And then it goes and fires an EventBridge event with those 8 Twitter messages. And that's when this gets picked up. And this step function workflow will take all of those messages that it's sent and it will use Bedrock this time, not ChatGPT, to figure out when is the best time given the global audience to post these 8 messages. And it will stagger them based on a set of rules that I've given. I tell it, don't post about the same thing every day or more than once a day. I think I usually tell it to wait like 2 or 3 days between posts. Don't post on the weekends. Don't, I don't know. I give it a whole set of rules, a whole thing, and then it goes and single threaded. It will go and figure out when is the next available time. It loads all the tweets that are scheduled in the future out of DynamoDB, and it says, okay, well, here's what I have going. Given the sets of rules, when's the
Hmm.
next available time that I can post this message? It uses the AI to figure out what's the next date given the set of rules, and then it schedules with a one-time event bridge schedule that all it does is call the Twitter API and post the message. And so it goes in sequence because it has to build up essentially this calendar of scheduled messages. And it'll say, okay, well, the last message that I have for this campaign or this blog post is this date, which means I have to wait 3 more days. Is there anything else on this day, or is that day on a weekend? Okay, let me move it to another day. Go on and so on and so forth. And schedule all
Yeah.
these one-time event bridge schedules. So really at the end, really what happens at the end of that is I have 8 messages that will come up. Usually it's over the span of like 6 weeks that I don't have to do anything with. It's allowed me to get the content in front of people 8 times, and I don't have to literally do anything. I just write the content. It's the same as the very first blog post, the procedure, I guess, as the very first blog
Mhm.
post I ever wrote in 2018. I write the markdown file, hit commit, hit push, and I'm done. Hands off. And it goes and does all the stuff automatically for me, so I don't ever have to touch it.
That's amazing. That's kind of really completely marketing automation that you did over there, right? For all of your content, and I can only say I see that as well, right? The more that I kind of bring bring content in the front of the audience, the more reactions also I get, and it's a pity, but um, I think you're doing a very good job in balancing good quality content with marketing your content. And a lot of others are unfortunately doing things different and are marketing more than creating good content. So I think this really empowers you to work like that, and I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's one of the things that I've tried to stay true about the entire time is focus on delivering quality content. Everything else that's done, I know it needs to happen. I personally don't want to do it because I like focusing on the content itself. So all these automations, all the objective AI pieces that I've put inside of this system, inside of this pipeline, it knows, okay, well, these are the things that have to be done. Let's go do them.
Yeah. So, and I think with the last 25 minutes that we did, you have made a point in my argumentation that I always say that writing good CI/CD pipelines or building good CI/CD pipelines is a true art, and it's kind of the most important thing in software development as a whole, right? Because the more that you automate, the less you need to worry about stuff, and this is true for content marketing here as well. And I think that's what a lot of people need to change in the way that, okay, I will build some pipeline in the background. No, that's not what you should do, right? You should focus on what's the aim that you have in your CI/CD pipeline from my perspective, and what do you want to achieve out of that. And that makes this pipeline that you have a true piece of software, and this is amazing, right? I think it's pretty cool. Cool. So we only talked a tiny bit about Amplify and Amplify hosting and Amplify CI/CD. What is there something you would wish from the CI/CD capabilities of Amplify that you would love to get from the team?
There, yes. So last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, I updated all of this code from node 12 to 18. And it was 12 because the version of SAM inside of the build image, inside of the Amplify
Mm-hmm.
build image that I use, was that old. And
Mm-hmm.
it took however long, year and a half, to get that build image updated to a newer version of SAM. Now, one of the things that they have inside of the pipelines, it's kind of hard to discover, but it is there. You can choose some of the tools and the versions of the tools that you want inside of that build image. But from the experiences that I've had, it adds a significant amount of time to the build step. So
Okay.
really, for me, the big wish there is to keep those build images up to date. Now, I'm not saying update the build image every time a version of SAM is released or every time a new runtime is released for any Lambda image, but more often than what it was in the past. Now, I'm sure that it was updated more recently than the past year and a half, but knowing knowledge is power. So knowing that the build image has been updated and I can move my Lambda functions from 12 to 18, and notice it's 18 and not 20. I wasn't able to get it. The version of SAM that was included in the build image uh, went up to 18. It didn't acknowledge
Mhm.
20. So it wasn't the most recent. And, I just am trying to keep this build as simple as possible. I don't want to build a custom image. I don't want to maintain a
Yep.
new Docker image. I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to have to try to
Yep.
manipulate all of these assets in order to get the pipeline working. So I'm just going to use what's there. So just making sure that that stays more current with some of these common tools for deployment would be my big wish item.
Cool. I think that's a valid one. It seems to be a problem not only for Amplify, but also for other services. Code Catalyst, I think, is still on Node 16 as well, with the build images, as far as I remember. Code Build, I'm not sure, but I think they also have 16. So I think that's something that the AWS team needs to work on, get more up to date there. Yeah, I think that's all that I had. So before we end, let's spend 25-ish seconds on what the hell is Momento doing that makes Momento so unique, because I've heard you around everywhere. And maybe then we can add a little bit besides all your blog where people can reach out to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, Momento is it's a service provider, software as a service, where we have a managed cache service and a managed event messaging service. So we call them cache and topics. And what's really nice is they're serverless services. So you have a serverless cache available at your fingertips, which is really, really nice because the caching mechanisms side of AWS generally aren't. And I'm not going to go into that despite the release that we had at reInvent. But no VPCs necessary, no additional infrastructure. It's literally just API calls. So you set up much like you would a DynamoDB table for a cache, and then you can just call it and use it. No configuring, no scaling configurations. It just works, and it scales from no use to millions of transactions a second, which is super cool. And then
Cool. And all hosted on AWS or where?
so it's technically, yes, it is hosted and built inside of AWS and on top of AWS services. But as far as consumers go and people that actually would use Momento, it's abstracted away. It's a managed service that you don't deploy anything into your account. It's just let me sign up with an API key and use said API key in the SDK.
Cool. And as you said, you were on the product team. Maybe you can answer the question whether you're looking to make this available for self-hosting as well going forward? Or are you not
Uh,
allowed to talk about that?
Contact sales. Self-hosting, probably no,
Okay,
but we do have options for like VPC private links and custom cells, basically implementations for somebody not hosted inside their own AWS account, but hosted for them inside of Momento's accounts.
cool. That makes sense. And then, last but not least, Alan, where can people besides your blog find you, reach out to you if they have any questions on the cool stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so everything you can find me at Allen Helton Dev everywhere on Twitter, on LinkedIn. It's my email address. Everything Allen Helton Dev. And I am pretty responsive everywhere
Cool.
as well. So feel free to reach out on anything. Also, I'm very active in the Believe in Serverless community. So if you go to believeinserverless.com, there's a Discord channel in there. feel free to join. It's free. You can ping me in there as well.
Amazing. Alan, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Took us longer than expected, as always, when I talk to people, but a lot of details and a lot of learnings, I think, for everyone that wants to become a self-paced content deliverer going forward, content creator going forward. And if you're already doing content, keep in mind that you're one of 10% of people that actually surf on the internet and produce some value for others. So please keep that up. And if you are frightened or if you think you can't do it, just don't think about it and get started, right? I think it's really important that you share your learnings and that gives others the possibility to get better as well. And that's what Alan is doing. And thank you. Thanks again for being on. And thank you for that, Alan, because I already learned a lot, not only today, but in all of the other things that you did.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you're right. The hardest part about content creation is getting started. And it's everybody gets imposter syndrome. I've been doing it for years and years and years. I still get it. I get nervous every time I post something. Uh, it's it. If you're worried about getting started and too nervous to post that first thing, just post it. It's the
Have you, yeah, yeah. Have you ever had something go viral from the post content that you created?
one one thing ever, and it was a blog post on the 5 types of architecture diagrams. And it still, I posted that probably 4 years ago, and it still gets comments and 1,000+ views every week. But yeah, that was the one that shot up past 1 million views in like 3 weeks. It was ridiculous. It's crazy.
Amazing. Amazing. Let's link that as well. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. And yeah, looking forward to do something together with you soon again.
All right. Sounds great. Good to see you.
Bye bye.